I took the fire lookout job because I wanted silence. That's what the application promised. Anyway, long stretches of nothing. No crowds, no noise. Just me, the forest, and a radio that almost never spoke unless it absolutely had to. The tower itself was 6 hours from the nearest town. A narrow dirt road snaked its way up through miles and miles of dense forest before finally opening up at the peak. From up there, the whole world felt far away, like I'd somehow stepped outside of it. My tower stood alone on a rocky ridge, its metal legs sunk deep into the stone. On top sat a small cabin, completely surrounded by windows. You could see for miles in every direction. Trees stretching out endlessly, broken only by distant mountains and the occasional glint of water. My job was simple. Watch for smoke. Log the weather conditions, answer radio calls if they came in. Most days, nothing happened. And that's what made the nights feel so heavy. The forest changes after dark. The wind moves differently, and sounds carry so much farther. Sometimes I'd hear a branch snap way down below and get this feeling, this unshakable feeling that I was being watched, even though I couldn't explain why. Still, I slept fine for the first week. The radio crackled for the first time on the 8th night. It was just after midnight. I was sitting at the small table, writing in my logbook, when the sudden burst of static shattered the silence. At first I just thought it was interference. The radio did that sometimes when the weather shifted. But then a voice came through. Tower 7, do you copy? I froze. Tower 7 was me. This is Tower 7, I replied after a second. Go ahead. There was a pause, long enough that I started to wonder if the signal had dropped. Then the voice came back. Good, you're awake. Something about the tone of that voice made my stomach tighten. It wasn't urgent, it wasn't official, it just sounded relieved. Who is this? I asked. Tower 9, the voice said. I frowned and reached for the map pinned to the wall. Tower 9 was on there, but it was marked inactive. Decommissioned years ago after a fire damaged the access road. That tower's not staffed, I said into the radio. Another pause. Yes, the voice replied. It is. I leaned closer to the radio. What's your name? I asked. The static grew louder for a moment, then faded out. I don't remember, the voice said. A chill moved through me, despite the warm air in the cabin. Are you reporting smoke? I asked, trying to keep my voice professional. No, the voice said. I'm reporting movement. I instinctively glanced out the windows. The forest below was a sea of black, the treetops barely visible in the moonlight. What kind of movement? I asked. Up here, the voice replied. My grip tightened on the edge of the table. There's no one else on the ridge, I said. I know, the voice answered. That's the problem. And then the radio went silent. I sat there for a long time afterward, just listening to the forest, watching the windows. Nothing moved, no lights, no figures, just trees and darkness. I convinced myself it was a prank. Someone using an old frequency, maybe a ranger messing around. The radio didn't speak again that night, but the next night it did. Tower 7, the voice said softly. It's closer now. I didn't respond right away. Closer to what? I finally asked. To you. I stood up and scanned the ridge again, my heart pounding in my chest. Still nothing. No headlights, no flashlights, no sign of anyone climbing toward the tower. You shouldn't be alone, the voice continued. They don't like it when you're alone. Who? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The static swelled, then settled. The ones who walk between towers. I shut the radio off. That was a mistake. The knocking started just minutes later, not on the door. It was on the metal legs beneath the cabin. Slow, hollow knocks that traveled upward through the entire structure, vibrating the floor beneath my feet. Like something tall and very heavy was moving around the base of my tower. I didn't look down. I just stayed in the center of the room until sunrise. When daylight finally came, I checked the radio logs. There was no record of any transmission from Tower 9, but written in the margin of my own logbook, in handwriting that wasn't mine, was a single sentence. We can see your light from here. I left the tower 2 days later. They never filled my position again. The second tower was deeper in the forest. Not higher, not newer. Just farther from everything. Getting there took most of a day. The road narrowed until it was barely more than packed dirt, cutting through dense trees that blocked out the sky. By the time I reached the base, my phone had lost signal completely. It was just me and the woods. The tower rose above the trees like a thin metal spine, disappearing into the canopy before emerging into the open air. At the top sat the cabin, small and square, windows wrapping all the way around. My relief at finally arriving faded as soon as I climbed the last of the stairs. The door was unlocked. That wasn't normal. Every single lookout locks the cabin when they leave, even if they're just stepping out for 5 minutes. It was drilled into us during training. I pushed the door open and stepped inside slowly, my hand resting near my belt. Nothing looked disturbed. The bed was made. Supplies were fully stocked. The logbook sat neatly placed on the table. It was as if the previous lookout had just stepped out for a moment. I picked up the radio and keyed the mic. Tower 14 checking in. I've arrived, but the cabin wasn't secured. Static crackled for a moment. Then a response from dispatch, distant and faint. Copy that, Tower 14. Previous lookout left unexpectedly. You're clear to proceed. I didn't like the wording. Left unexpectedly could mean anything, but I didn't question it. It was my job to be here. That night, the forest felt different than it had at my first tower. The scrape of a chair leg on the floor. The sound of my own breathing. It felt like the entire world was holding its breath. I turned off the main light and left only a small lamp on near the desk, casting long shadows across the room. A shape at the edge of the tree line. At first, I thought it was just my eyes adjusting to the dark, a trick of the light, a shadow where shadows didn't quite make sense. But as I focused, squinting into the gloom, the shape became clearer. Someone was standing there. It was too far away to see any details. Just a tall, upright figure where the forest ended and the clearing began. I waited for it to move. It didn't. Minutes ticked by and the figure remained perfectly still. With shaking hands, I lifted the binoculars to my eyes and looked again. The shape sharpened. It wasn't wearing any reflective gear. No uniform, no backpack, just a dark silhouette, its arms hanging limply at its sides, and it was facing the tower. I grabbed the radio, my voice trembling slightly. "Dispatch, this is Tower 14. I have a possible person at the tree line. Can you confirm if anyone is in the area?" The response took longer than it should have. Finally, static broke, followed by a calm, detached voice. "Negative, Tower 14. No one is scheduled near your location." The figure was closer. It hadn't walked, it hadn't run, it was just closer. "How far?" dispatch asked. I don't know," I stammered. "It's not moving, it's just there." Another long pause stretched the silence. "Tower 14. The voice said carefully and deliberately, "Do not leave the cabin." Then it stepped back into the trees and vanished. I didn't sleep a wink that night. Every hour I checked the clearing. Sometimes the figure was there. Sometimes it wasn't. But each time it returned, it was closer to the base of my tower. By 4 in the morning, it stood directly beneath me. Then came the climbing, a faint creak of metal as weight shifted onto the lower rungs of the tower ladder, slow, deliberate movements. No rush, no hesitation. Then a voice I didn't recognize broke through. My blood ran cold. "Who is this?" I demanded. "Someone who looked," the voice replied flatly. The last tower was the oldest. It wasn't supposed to be in use anymore. Not really. It stayed on the maps as a backup, something they could staff in an emergency fire season. When I was assigned there, I told myself it would be temporary, just a few weeks. The tower sat farther north than the others, where the forest thinned and the land dropped away into long valleys. At night, you could see distant lights from small towns far below. The cabin was smaller than the others. The windows were thick and scratched, clouded from decades of wind and weather. On my first night, I turned on the main lamp and watched the darkness settle. That's when I noticed the lights. Far off in the distance, beyond where the maps said any town should be, a single white light blinked on, then off, then on again. I lifted the binoculars. The light wasn't stationary. It moved slightly between blinks, like someone walking with a lantern far below. I turned off my lamp. The light in the distance stopped. I stood there, heart pounding, and slowly turned the lamp back on. Lamp on. Blink, my throat went dry. Dispatch, I said into the radio. I'm observing a light source outside my mapped range. It appears to be reacting to illumination from my tower. Static answered. Then, faintly, a reply, Tower 21, there are no inhabited areas in that direction. I looked back through the binoculars. The light was closer now. Not by much, but enough to notice. That night, I didn't turn the lamp off again. By the second night, there were more lights, 2 at first, then 3, all blinking at irregular intervals, scattered across the valley like stars that had fallen too low. I stopped sleeping near the windows. I kept the lamp on constantly. On the third night, the radio clicked on by itself. No static, no call sign, just a soft voice. You see us now. My hand trembled as I grabbed the microphone. Because you turned the light on, the voice said, and that means you're looking. Something thumped softly beneath the cabin. Then, again, like someone testing the supports, I shut off the lamp. I stood there in the darkness until morning, afraid to move. When dawn came, the valley looked empty. No signs of lights, no movement. But when I checked the logbook, I found new entries, dozens of them, each one a timestamp, each one matching the moments I had turned the lamp on and off. At the bottom of the page, written carefully, were the words, "Thank you for answering." The tower was officially retired a month later. They said it was due to age and maintenance costs. But I know the real reason. Some signals aren't meant to be returned, and some lights aren't meant to be seen. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to like and subscribe for more.